not going to adopt, and that's not good for the tree. You want them to develop the root system.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is 10 o'clock. I think we'll start. So good morning. My name is Quentin Beaumont. I'm the manager of agricultural services here at the County of Stettler, and we are talking trees with Toso. Our guest again, Toso Bozic. He's a tree expert and arborist, and I have him from now all the way through until September 28th. Tuesdays, we're talking trees with Toso. Toso, good morning.
Good morning, Quentin.
What is your topic for this week?
For this week, it's going to be drought, as we are in the midst of the drought and the impact of the drought on the trees and what you can do about the drought, how to look for the tree care and maintenance. That's what we're going to talk today.
That sounds good. Toso, take her away.
Okay. Again, thank you, Quentin. I really appreciate Stettler County organizing this webinar. As probably Quentin mentioned, those webinars is going to be available to you guys in the county on the YouTube. So if you missed this webinar, you can always go to county website and find those webinars. And it's going to be 8 more, as Quentin said. So lots of topics on the trees and will be available to the Stettler residents. I'm just going to quickly go. I always go about my businesses. I have actually 2 businesses. One is Yard Whispers and an ATTS group. We provide the consulting. I don't do any services of the tree removal or anything like that, but we do provide services on all about trees or to the residents or golf courses, municipal government, parks, developers, and NGOs. So tree is my passion, as Quentin knows me for a long time, and I do have a lots of passion for trees. Quickly about the services, as I said, arborist services. One of the things I want to, if you guys have any tree that are proposing the hazards, I'm also tree risk and hazard assessment certified. I do provide appraisal as well and preservation protection plan as arborist services. I have 2 projects with the counties doing the forest tree inventory and forest management, developing the tree bylaws and policy regulation as well. So also with shelter belts and windbreaks and pretty much anything on the trees on private land. We do have a relationship with one company from Quebec that we provide a supply regarding the tree pests. And we provide the pheromones and monitoring traps and accessory tools as well. So I always start ending my presentation with the key messages. And for today, come to the drought. Number 1, I always said diversify, diversify, diversify. So the more trees and shrubs you plant, the better it is. Think about from now, if you want to plant any trees now or in the fall, choose some drought-resistant species. Good friend of mine told me in last 20 years, every year, he works for the forest fires, and he told me almost every year it was record-breaking temperature that is climbing up. So whatever we want or not, climate change is gonna stay here and be with us. So having diversity of the trees and shrubs that can adapt to the constant change of the climate is very important. Understand your water requirements. Not every tree need equal amount of water. Not every tree that with depending on the age, depending of the things what trees are needed. So sorry for misspelling. So it's a water requirements that needs to be that you need to understand. Water trees regularly and properly. Lots of people water trees, but actually they don't water them on the regular basis, and nor they water properly. And I'm going to talk about that. The biggest thing, and probably the best thing you can do for your trees, doesn't matter how old, how young, and how healthy it is, put a wood chip mulch on it. That will protect the roots. Roots are an engine. of your trees, and especially now during the drought, and when the roots dry, trees is kaput, it's dead. So protecting the roots is the most important thing you can do to for your trees, and putting the wood chip mulch is probably the best thing that you can do for your trees, regardless. Once you put it, it's gonna stay for a long time and helping your trees for a long time. Don't fertilize now. Most of the fertilizer is sodium. It's taking away water, so don't fertilize during the drought. Don't prune unless you have some dead branches and posing the risk for that. You have to be prepared for the insects and disease outbreak, because the drought provide humongous stress to the trees, and it's like a magnet for the insects and disease to come after. And I'm going to a little bit more explain to you. Even though we're in August and still beautiful summer, hot days, you have to think about prepare the trees for winter. Again, putting the wood chips and water for the in late in the fall. We have a very dry fall, as you probably know. Water and fertilizer next spring. Make sure that for the next spring you prepare. You put some fertilizer, put some nitrogen or another fertilizer to boost your roots, because it's going this summer is very hard on the lots of trees because of the drought. For the municipal political leaders and emergency services, really, I strongly encourage you to look into develop the fire management plans that include a forest. As I said to Quinton, in the county of Stettler, we have around 29,000 acres of the privately owned forest. Many of that forest is old and mature, and forest fire will be parts of your county. So preparedness is very important. But also in the long run, what we're noticing, the fire and disappearance of the forest, that some of the tree may not come back at all. It might go back to the prairies, and what that means to the environment, what it means to the water, what it means to biodiversity. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit as well. So diversity, I show this slide over and over, pretty much on every my presentation. Good friend of mine bought this 10 acres and 2008, and now has a beautiful diversity of the trees and shrubs. He grouped them different ages, different sizes, different requirements, and that's the diversity. If you look the surrounding neighborhood area, they don't have that diversity. They have one row of the spruce trees, and that's it. On the bottom of the photos, you have 2 rows or 3 rows, and that's it. This area of 10 acres has over 54 different tree species. And again, diversify. Even the drought, if you have just one row, you might then lose all of them, and you're not going to have trees around your property. If you have multiple rows, multiple tree and shrub species, multiple of that, even drought is not going to kill all of them. Something is going to survive. Something is going to stand, and that's very important that you know for your property. So what Terry did, he has 54 species. As you can see, he really planted a whole range of them. He's just west of the Red Deer, along the Red Deer River. And some of those species are definitely drought prone. Some of them are very drought resistant. But in combination as a forest, they really function as a forest. And then that's another thing, you know, if you have a tree, just one tree, that tree is not resistant if you have a compared to the 5 trees, because trees do like groupings. Trees do like be a communication with other trees and protecting to each other and providing the benefits of the to each other. So as you can see, there is a 52 or 54 of them, and variety is there. Having this variety, even drought like what we experience right now, is not going to kill all of those trees. No way. So if you want some of the key message, plant the diversity as much as you can, and it's never late. What is the drought? I found this definition from the Natural Resource Canada, Government of Canada. And again, it's a shortage of the precipitation over the extended period, usually season or more, resulting in inefficient water availability that impact vegetation and some people. when it comes to the trees, on the bottom of the for this definition, you have a really is showing the symptoms of the drought. And you can see the most of the time on the left side here, drought first affect the furthest and top branches, and you can see that top branches are dead and no leaves. Also, furthest branches on the side. So the most of the trees that they experience the drought, they will keep the leaves in the center of the tree. All of the leaves around the perimeter will start disappearing and either dropping off or really get wilted and really yellowing. Here is another example. You can see in the center of this amber cherry, it's a high density of the leaves all around. It's very thin. The leaves are disappearing. And actually, yesterday I checked this as well because this photo was taken 2 weeks ago. Yesterday I checked it. All of this on the top leaves are gone, dead, and only center is still alive. Again, those are some of the symptoms. This one is Linden Tree, and you may not see it. And I was around the 5 o'clock in the afternoon 4 days ago, and this tree leaves are totally cupping. We call cupping, and it's really kind of like a folding together, and it's very thin crown. And again, that's one of the symptoms of the drought. One of the most common symptoms that you're gonna find out is what you see in this photo. Is you have these aspen trees, and around the edges of the leaves, they are brown and they are dead. And again, they start curling and cupping. With the conifers, sometimes you can see whole tree. If it's really bad drought, that is whole tree is just red. But usually you start changing the colors of the needles, kind of going from dark green or green to the yellowish, and then the needles start falling off. So those are some of the most common symptoms of the drought. And if you look in the trees on your yard or natural forest, you're going to see many times something like this. That many trees doesn't have enough leaves. You can see through the leaves and has a very thin crown, and then you're gonna recognize that that's the reason is the drought. How the drought works? This is where it's really scary. Drought extremely stress the trees, and trees under the stress try to respond. Then you come with the foliators early in the spring, even all the way to late in the fall. You get a foliator that is wiping out whatever leaves are available on the trees, and that provides extra stress. Then following that, there's a lot of wood borers. You have aspen, poplar borer. You have other wood borers that is really taking and going inside of the wood. And then fungi is next. Then you have cankers, and that is start damaging the trees, and then you have a rot that eventually basically kill the tree. So it's a combination of the things that happen that leads to the mortality of the trees. This tree is in front of the Lowe's in Edmonton, that used to be Rona, and just last year was a beautiful tree. And it was start last year. I told the managers to water those trees. They haven't watered in the fall. Even though they're a business of selling the trees and telling the people how to sell the trees, I tell them, water your own trees in front of your business. They haven't. This tree also has in last 3 years has one insect called European Elm Scales. That's why its trunk looks very black and dark. So the European Elm Scales noticed that the trees is weakened, and they went after the trees, and then the drought came in, and basically this tree is now kaput, dead. To replace this tree in the city of Edmonton, one tree is probably to removal and planting the new one, and of this size, we are talking about $2,000, $2,500 cost, which is significant. So if you have something like this, try to avoid that. But that's how system works, and that's the again long-term impact of the drought. Is the stress. Once trees are stressed, everything goes after that. What are the symptoms? As I mentioned, some of them. There is a permanent and temporary wilting, lighter green, yellow-green foliage, leaves coat, That's what I mentioned in that aspen trees. You have a leaf scorch around the margins, where the whole leaf is almost brown. Cupping, curling, rolling. It's a very common symptoms of the drought. In the coniferous, usually needles in the last year or year before start getting yellow, browning on the needle tips. That is indication of the drought. Leaves drop prematurely, shedding. Right now, as we speak, lots of leaves. You can, if you find lots of leaves on the ground, most likely it's through the drought. You may have some insect that is going to can defoliate your trees, but it's most likely it's a drought. Some of the cracks on the bark, because sudden loss of the water can create the cracks on the bark or the trunk. Small leaves die back, as I showed you guys in the previous slide, and the dead trees. Eventually, you're going to start noticing the dead trees, and that's the results of the drought. And again, here's some of the examples. This is a leaf scorch. You can see on this side here, on the edges of the leaves of this aspen tree in front of the Walmart, actually, is brown and red. Cupping and curling, which is here, as you can see, needles totally brown. You can see the browning of the needles. Again, on the trunk, on the crown, you see the very thin amount of leaves. Center of the trees is lots of leaves, but are surrounding, and the tops or the furthest is no. And again, this tree, and the close-up photos of those leaves. You can see the scrubbiness of the tree. So those are some of the what to look for in the case of the drought. What can you do? Well, there is a few things you can do, and I'm gonna go through some of them. Watering, of course. Wood chips. Don't prune, again. Fertilize, don't fertilize either. Control some of the weeds. If you have a small trees, definitely weeds is gonna compete for the moisture and take the moisture away. Even for the big trees, actually, weeds can take the moisture away. Control the outbreak of the pests. You might have some of them already, or coming even the fall. You might have some of the pests outbreaks, and again, plan for the diversity. When it comes to the watering, is one of the most important tools that you have in your disposal to combat the drought. There's several things that you really have to pay attention before you start watering. What are some of the key factors? You have to know your soil type. If you have a sandy soil, you can put lots of water, and water is going to go to the sand. And you have to really realize that watering trees on the sandy soil is the efficiency and impact might not be as the same as you have a good agricultural brown soil or gray loamy soil. On the other hand, if you have lots of clay in your soil, lots of people made a very common mistake. They to put too much water, and the clay is holding that water sometimes, and they're holding that water above the ground, above the clay layer, close to the root system. And what you might do, you might actually drown your trees. So you got to be very careful with the clay. Definitely, you see the clay, they stiffen in the drought, and you have a chunks of clay, but the roots can go through that clay and the cracks and go further out looking for the water. But again, if you put too much water, the water is going to stay in the clay and drown your roots and deprive the roots from the oxygen. So make sure that when you have a heavy clay, don't water them, but don't water them equally as another type of the soil, and especially don't water the same amount if you have in the sandy soil. So in the case if you have a sandy soil and you have a water thirsty species such as a hybrid poplar or some of the other species, I think you planted the wrong trees. There is a lot of trees like a pine, they love sandy soil. So you might think in the long term that you might have a tree replacement depending on the soil type, and adjust your choice of trees depending on the soil. Age of the trees. If you plant the trees in May or you plant the trees 4 or 5 years ago, or you have a 50 years old trees. Each of them requires different watering, amount of water, timing, frequency. Newly planted trees, they require watering when you plant them, and they require twice a week. And over the period of time or during the growing season, they require. If you already have a few years old trees, you might have a once a week watering, and the amount of watering depending on the size of course of the trees. Mature trees, many of them can sustain the drought, but if they start being affected by the drought, again, they will require quite a significant amount of water depending on the size of the tree. So to give you some of the example, one large hybrid poplar tree can take probably 500 gallons of water a day that can go through the tree. So they take to the roots and go through the tree and evaporate through the leaves easily, 500 gallons a day. So again, you have to look what's the age and of the trees and when you planted them. As I said, you have a tree species types. As I said, pine can handle the dry area. They love sandy soil. They love when it's dry. Water-loving species like willows, hybrid poplar, elm, they require lots of water. They need a lot of water. One of the things with the water-loving species like aspen, balsam poplar, hybrid poplars, they have elm, they have or green ash, they have a very extensive root system. They will spread the roots wide on the seek of the water, and that's one of the mechanisms to sustain during the harsh times such as drought. Water quality and quantity. What kind of quality of the water? Many of you might have a high sodium levels in your water, and when you do the watering, you basically add the sodium into the soil and basically killing your trees. And the quantity, how much water do you have? Do you have a lot access to the lots of water or not? Do you have a dugout? Do you need a well, or where are you going to get the water? Same thing with availability of the water. Lots of people might not have a good water, and they need to basically purchase the water or get the water from the town, depending what it is. What kind of delivery system that you have? How are you going to water those trees? Are you going to have a drip irrigation? Are you going to have sprinkles? Are you going to have a large sprinklers irrigation, like a large irrigation that some of you have for the crops? Or are you going to do the hand watering or the bags? And I'm going to show you how some of them look like. So think about how you're going to deliver that water to the trees. What's the best way? And that is going to be economically efficient, that is going to be, but still very impactful. Time of the day, year and month. During the day, absolutely water during late at night and early in the morning. But if you have a scorching day and you have a small little trees, water them 2 o'clock afternoon. What that will create water, trees is under the stress. And when you water them in 2 or 3 o'clock afternoon, it's gonna cool them off. It's gonna help them out to cool off. Otherwise, it's gonna prolong. If you wait till 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock, it's gonna prolong the pain to the trees. So lots of that's a very common myth. People said don't water during the hot weather. No, if you have a plus 35 in Stettler or in your county and scorching, and you have a small little trees, and you can see the leaves are start cupping and folding, just spray them with the cold water, cool them off, take the pressure off, and then late at night water them properly. So again, that's a very, I don't know where that myth is coming from. Don't water them when it's the hottest. No, water them when it's really thing that is very, very dry and trees are really suffering. Cost, can you do the efficiently effectively watering the trees? If you can, then we might considering the planting the trees that is required the low maintenance and low water requirements. And there is a few choices there as well. So watering, first thing you have to do is again quality. Test your water for sodium. Don't water the trees that has a high sodium level. Eventually, sodium is going to build in the roots, in the soil, and also in the plant. Once you build a high sodium in your plant, tree is going to be done in the long run. So again, test for the sodium in the water. Now prioritize the watering. Again, new and young and newly planted requires most water. They are small. They don't have extensive root system. Their roots are in the first 2 inches of the soil, not wide, not spread. And when the drought hits, the soil dries up and basically kill them very quickly. So how drought kills, and I explained just a short while ago to Quinton, drought kills because of the not enough water. So water go from roots to the top of the trees, and it's called like a little tubes called trachea, and those water flows to those tubes. When you don't have enough water in those tubes, it creates like a pockets of air, and that pockets of air block the water movement, and it's called embolism, same as in our blood system. If we got embolism, we got a stroke, and that's basically how drought kill the trees, because it's simple water, not just doesn't have enough water, but create that air pockets that doesn't let the water go through, and that's the way you kill the trees. And again, most importantly, in the roots as well, because if you have a drought, 95% of the roots are in the top first 6 or 8 inches of the in the soil. 95%. Other 5% are a little bit more deeper. So that if you have a drought, the drought is going to go in those 6 or 8 inches of the soil and take the moisture away, and then the root is going to be killed. And that's one of the most danger parts for the tree. When the roots doesn't have enough water, they died, and then the whole tree died in that sense. Frequency. So how frequently you is the most important. You water your trees is very important to remember. Rather, don't do the frequently. Do in the certain level, once a week or twice a week, depending on the tree species, depending on the soil. But make sure that you do the proper watering, and that is that frequency. Don't try to dump huge amount of water and then kind of forget about or next 2 weeks. No, I'd rather take a smaller amount of water and water them twice a week, every week. And if it's weather improve once a week, every week, or if it's weather improve every 2 weeks, then water them, put too huge amount of water, and then kind of forget about 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that. So the frequency, make sure that you frequently water those, frequently water those trees. Again, whatever, depending on, again, many factors, age and the species. Water, the size, I mentioned size of the trees, and soil condition and weather conditions. Again, you may get a flash floods. You might get a sudden rain with a huge amount of water. Question is how much of that water is going to go deep in the soil. How much of that water is going to perlocate into 6 or 8 inches of the depth of the soil in the soil. Sometimes during those summer heavy rains, heavy rain very quickly kind of soaked first inch or two of the soil. After that, water start running off of the land, and really doesn't perlocate into the deep soil. So again, to check that out, how do you check the amount of moisture in the roots in the soil? Is basically if you can take a screwdriver that is 6 or 8 inch long and push into the soil. If it's easy go into the soil, most likely you have enough moisture in the soil. If it doesn't go or goes 1 or 2 inch and after that is hard or doesn't go through, you are definitely in deficiency in the moisture in the roots. If you planted already trees, plant them in water them. If you plant them in May, water them right away. If you're planning to plant the trees in September, caliper trees, September and October, again, water them immediately, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Again, preferably early in the morning or evening that you need to water them. But again, if you have a 5 days or 7 days plus 35, 37, watering them in 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 o'clock afternoon, just cool them off, it will greatly help the trees. Soak them, don't flood them. Have a patience, let them trickle down. That's why I like the drip irrigation. It's slowly watering and water slowly percolate into the soil and in the deep in the soil. How much water? I read about so many times scientific studies on the how much water to the trees, and still today we have no idea how much each tree, each area, each place need optimum amount of water for the trees. There is some rule of thumbs, but really how much is really boils down on the trees and your site, and you are the best to judge on that. Because again, there is so many studies are done, but nobody will tell you this tree in this soil require 10 gallons of water per inch of the diameter. In that might not apply to your place. Water large trees in the fall before the freeze. Really water them, especially now after the drought. That trees is so much under the stress. Roots are so much under the stress. Putting the water late in the fall, which means October, mid-October, end of October. Put lots of water in the roots, and that water is going to stay for the spring. And when the spring, which are usually dry and cold, that water will be available to the trees in the spring, which is very important to when the trees start growing in the spring. And mulch, put the wood chips. Put wood chips is probably the best friend to keep your moisture. Wood chips, I look around the cities and towns, anywhere when there is a wood chips, trees are definitely impacted by the droughts, but they're okay. Where there is no wood chips, trees are struggling way more than the trees with the wood chips. As I said, unfortunately, in Canada, we have nobody did the research on that how much watering. I always go to our American friends. They put lots of money into the research, come to the trees. And this is from University of Minnesota. And this is just some of the their recommendation, their kind of rule of thumb. If you have a 1 inch in diameter, and what we always, when we measure in the caliper trees, we measure 6 inch above the ground, and then we measure the caliper, the size of the tree. If it's 1 inch, you put a 1 or 2 gallon of the water. And if 2 inch, 2 or 3 gallon. In the first 2 weeks after the planting, water daily. 3 to 12 weeks after the planting, water every 2 or 3 days. After 12 weeks, water weekly until the roots are established. Again, those are just some of the rule of thumbs. It really doesn't say a lot to our area. And again, you can try this and see, okay, if I water every 2 days or 3 days, small trees, see how trees react. You're gonna see the response of the trees. Are they still struggling, or they are doing okay? They will survive. And what now in the drought, what trees needs are the survival mode. They need to survive because it's really onslaught of the drought. That is life and death for them. Now, here's one of the things that you all the time use. Lots of people made a very common mistake. They take a watering and hose, and they put the hose right next to the trunk, right there. That's the last place you're gonna put. You need to water big mature trees. There's something we called dripline. So the dripline is basically, imagine a line where the furthest branches, furthest reaches of the big tree, put vertically to the ground, and it's called dripline. For most of the trees, the roots are 2 or 3 times height of the canopy. They're further away. It's those small little roots that provide the water and nutrients, and they are furthest away from the canopy, from the trunk and canopy of the trees. They really go far away. They're usually between the 2 and 4 inches in the top soil, and that's where you need to water. So if you look at this graph, don't water within a drip line. Generally speaking, I would, unless that you really have smaller tree that you might do. But generally speaking, you know, start watering where the drip line ends and further away. And again, this is a prime example where you might need to water the trees. And again, coming where lots of people take buckets or hoses and right away close to the trunk. That's the last place you need to water your trees. Water your trees further away from trunk, at least where the drip line begins, and then you start water. That's where the most important roots are. So again, keep this picture in mind when you do the watering, tree watering. What kind of system you might have? I prefer drip irrigation. It's probably the best if you can. They have a plus. Every system has a pluses and minuses, and you have a whole range of the sprinkler system. You have a hand hose watering. In the cities, if you have individual trees, we have these water bags. We fill up with the water, and they have a little holes, and they slowly releasing the water for the newly planted caliper trees. You can see also here very thick layer of the wood chips, which is probably 4 to 6 inches, which is perfect. And this tree got a little bit water, planted 2 years ago, I think, and doing okay. Again, which system you might have is depending on your finance and also how much land and availability of the water and what's the best way to water your tree. So whatever you do, again, follow some of those rules that I mentioned before. Mulching. Again, this is probably beside the watering that you need to do is that in the long run, it's the best thing you can do to your trees. The picture on this one is actually the town of Stettler. I took a photo when I was visiting the town for the helping the town with the trees. First thing with the mulching, never put a mulch next to the trunk. Never create this little volcano. Never do that. Always create a donut. Okay, that's number one. And again, by doing that, this is where the water is going to collect and slowly recharge. The biggest thing is my goodness. The biggest thing is to keep the mice and rodents away from the trunk. Also, if you put a sump like this, moisture is a perfect moisture will create a perfect condition for the fungi that will gonna attack the tree trunk and basically cradle the trunk and kill the trunk. So again, never create a volcano. Now, the other thing, what I always said, if you can put in the whole big area wood chips, what you have here or here or here, is ideal. It's really number one. In the area when you put the wood chips, you're not going to come with a lawnmower and cut the grass around those trees. So you're not going to do any damage. Number two, it's a huge area that is going to keep the moisture for a long period of time. And that's what you want. Because if I was in Slave Lake County, invited me to do some work over there, and I showed the people. It was very dry. Forest fire was raging in that area, and I in one playground where they put the wood chips, I dug up and I said, look, after 2 inches, you're gonna find the moisture. It's right away moisture. So again, what you might do, even if you have a wood chips and it's drought, the best thing you can do, actually water this area under the wood chips. Water the wood chips, and that will go slowly down, perlocate, store the water, and really help your trees. And that's, I always said, beside the watering that you need to do now as a drought, the best long-term solution is putting the wood chips. Okay. Now, lots of people use the mulch for the weed control, which is okay and sometimes necessary. But there is the big difference. As you can see, the rocks and gravel. Rocks and gravel, they definitely provide a little bit more, keeping the moisture longer. No, and they do the good control of the weeds. But the rock and gravel does not provide any nutrients to the tree, none, zilch. Okay, And also they don't hold enough water as the wood chips. Okay, then you have a plastic mulch or mats that again it's designed for the purpose of the weed control, but also helps the keeping the moisture. Now in a drought, it could be very detrimental because the black plastic will attract more sun and store more energy or sun energy into the root system. Basically, can cook your trees. So when you look for the long term, again, I would always stay away from those two if you can. I would much go to the organic. Now, on organic side, you have a crop residue like a straw. Okay, you can do that. The straw is not nutriently rich as the wood chips. Also, with the straw, you might have some residues from the herbicide that is used prior the harvesting of the straw, and you have a herbicide residues. Now, within the wood chips, lots of people, as you can see in this picture, you have a bark, you have a chips, you have a mulch, and again, they're just different color. Bark it's okay, mulch. Don't get me wrong, but bark has a zero almost nutrients or very little, and they are dry, and they don't hold as good as more moisture as the wood chips. Now with the wood chips, we call something arborist wood chips when you have a inside wood and bark, all of them combined. So you have a wood, this one and this one. Those are probably the best, and we call arborist wood chips. So what we call arborist, because arborists do the pruning, and all of the branches, all of the parts of the wood, we chip it. That one is the best. And if you in the county, which I probably believe you guys have a landfill, and lots of people bring the branches and trees into your landfill, and if you can chip it and give back to the people to use for the control of the weeds and also putting the mulch in the trees. It's the one if the top notch is this wood chips. Okay. And again, as we call arborist. This is a fine grind, I think the 1 inch, and it's a bark and wood and everything else. And this is much more like a mulch. It's a 3 or 4 inch, but it's still coming from the same sources. It's just different grinding method in that shell. So again, keep in mind, if you can put the wood mulch and put the wood chips, put the arborist wood chips. Try to stay away from rocks. Try to stay away from the plastic. Try to stay away from the bark. Put a proper arborist wood chips, and that will hold the moisture for a long period of time. That will provide the nutrients what trees are needed during the stress. Again, what are the benefits? It's definitely enhance the water infiltration. It slowly percolate into the root system, especially during the drought. Protect your roots in the cold weather that winter is going to come few months from now, and having the wood chips is going to hold the cold air on the surface, will not allow the cold air go easily into the roots and kill your trees. It's a moderate temperature, because again, when you put the wood chips and you water that wood chips, you have a moisture, stay the moisture, and that temperature is always almost the same all the time. The surface of the wood chips, because you put a 2 to 4 inch, I prefer 4 to 6 inch. If you can put a 4 or 6 inch of wood chips, it's the best. Minimum 2, preferably best is 6, 4 is okay. So if you put that much, that will keep again moisture and keep the temperature and cool off the roots and protect the roots, and that's what you want. And the last and not least, why I prefer that arborist wood chips or wood chips is providing nutrients. Rocks and plastic and bark doesn't provide any nutrients to the trees. If you're already doing it, do the proper way. And again, there's a bunch of environmental benefits for having the wood chips. Lots of people this time, they try to do the weed control and try to keep the soil black. Don't. You're gonna damage the roots who are under the stress, most likely deficient of the water, and exposing them to the more to the dry air or not enough water is definitely going to create a damage to your roots. So right now, during the drought, avoid any mechanical weed control. Don't do it. It will really damage your trees. Fertilizing. Don't do the fertilizer either, because it's basically sodium. You're adding the sodium, and sodium is not something that trees need, and it's not good for the water either. So if you're gonna, and it's too late already for the fertilizer. If you wanna do the fertilizer, do it in May, June, next year, and do the way again. You have a picture on where is a drip line again, and furthest away that you try to encourage the root. So do not fertilize right now. You're gonna make a way more damage than good to your trees. Any mechanical injuries. I was in town of Grand Cache, and I did some inspection of the trees they planted. 85% of the trees were damaged by the root collar, roots, or trunk. All of them done by the lawnmower, weed whackers, and other mechanical during the winter time when they pushing the snow. They damage the bark, damage the trunks. They all kind of damages. You can avoid that, and that's where also wood chips comes in. If you put the wood chips around this tree, no lawnmower is going to come here. Period. Or around the surface of some of those trees with the roots. No lawnmower is going to come, because if you provide any mechanical injuries to the trees that is under the stress, that doesn't have enough moisture, it's called for the fungi and absolutely additional stress, unnecessary stress to the tree. So be very careful with those lawnmowers and weed whackers, because you don't want to damage your trees now. Compaction. If you have a livestock, close your shelter belts. Try to keep them away. I know the shelter belts provide the shades and cooling off your livestock, but also that's also create a compaction. Having the compaction in a dry in an area of drought is even furthermore put the pressure on the roots, and roots don't have oxygen, don't have enough water, and it's pretty much death penalty for the roots. So any path that you might have where there are lots of vehicles or people are congregating, try to avoid that. And again, that's what you might use. Some of the area you might use wood chips to keep the people away from the trees, in a nutshell. And again, try to avoid any soil compaction, because if you put the soil compaction, it's bad in the first place, but during the drought is definitely detrimental for the trees. Planting trees properly. As I said, I visiting so many towns in Alberta, and more I realized that majority of the trees that having the problems and dying is actually, when I look back, is vast majority they have not planted properly. Fall is coming. Lots of people, you can buy on sale those caliper trees in the stores or tree nurseries. And it's perfect timing, actually, matter of fact, in September, in October, to plant some of those trees, caliper trees. The biggest thing you can do, dig hole that is 2 or 3 times wider than the root ball, remove the soil from the pot or burlap and basket, remove entire soil, make a slopes on the side, take the soil from this root ball, mix with this one, don't add any bone meal or anything like that. Always look where is the joints between the trunk and where the roots begin, and that has to be in the same heights at the surface of your land. Okay, I'm gonna show you in next slide. Here is a planting hole that is 2 or 3 times size. It's a little bit under the slope. Always pay attention to something we call the root collar. That's where how deep you're gonna plant your trees. That you can, when you plant the trees, that you're gonna see this joint where the trunk begins, where the root begins. It's basically, that's the blue line here. That's where the blue line is gonna be. That's the depth. If you have a lot buy this in the potted material or even burlap basket, the best thing you can do, actually, matter of fact, take all of those roots, all of the soil out, look for any roots that is crossing, that they're twinkling, that rubbing or something, remove them. that soil, what I do, sometimes I show to the people, I take the little barrel or a piece of like a pot, and I take hose and take all of the soil out, look the roots, prune some of the roots, take the soil from the pot, mixed up with this soil, and put them back together. Okay, again, planting hole, let's look at the slopes. These people should take all of this soil even further away, remove them from this reed bowl, mix with the surrounding soil, plant them in this proper depth, and you do the backfill with this soil. Don't add any soil amendments. Don't add bone meal. Don't add rock on the bottom. Okay, and do the proper planting. Mulching, again, I can stress enough. This fellow showing what's the depth, and that's the depth between that, how deep the planted, that you can see the root color. Lots of, again, in so many towns, in so many yards, I've seen the main cause of the problem: people plant too deep. They take this, they dig up the hole or with a spade, and they just drop down, and in average, they planted too deep, between the 4 to 8 to 12 inches. So if you take this tree, and especially now, because most of the topsoil is 6 inches, 8 inches, but you put them already too deep, all of the roots of this tree is going to go into the heavy clay or deep inside in the parent material of the soil. There's nothing there for them. And what they do, they stay in this good soil. They stay and they do the root bound. They survive 2 or 3, 5 years, and after that they die. And again, and it's like most common problem is people don't plant the tree properly. In the case when it's have a year like this, when there's lots of drought, that's a death penalty for the trees. Lots of trees might die right now, not because of drought, but because they planted too deep. They haven't do any mulching and proper tree planting, and this root ball will dry out and kaput. But it's, again, to avoid that, do the proper planting. Choose some of the drought tolerant species. Here is a list of them. There's more of them. Each of them has a pluses and minuses. There is some of the few non-native but very invasive species such as Caragana, Russian olive, silver buffalo berry, sea buckthorn. They are very drought resistant. In your area, in your county, in some you can maybe justify to plant Caragana because it's very hard soil. But there is lots of other choices that you can plant in your county. Now I will gonna a little bit shift. This is all of the talk was for your own private property trees. Now I'm gonna a little bit just shift for the Stettler County and what's going on in the bigger scheme. This is an inventory I've done in 2011. In your county, guys, the amount of forested area is 29,000 acres that the farmers and ranchers, acreages, and landowners own the trees. Mostly it's aspen, balsam poplar, and some of the white spruce. Mostly it's on the west side of the county that you have a lots of in that area around the lakes, around the agriculture area. So it's still significant amount of the natural forest. If you drive around and look around, you might notice in lots of those aspen start to dying out or don't have enough leaves on the trees. You're going to see the dead sticks in the natural forest. What that means to you guys. So what 4 years ago, I connect with the folks from Canadian Forest Service. Well, actually, no, in 2002, I was part of the project with Canadian Forest Service about aspen dieback. Started in Saskatchewan and eastern Alberta, and then moved to the Peace River. And the folks who did the research on the huge, and we are talking about millions of acres of aspen dying in parts of the Saskatchewan, north of the Yellowhead, and now parts of the Peace River region, is a huge amount of aspen. Natural aspen that used to be very healthy is dying. So how did it look like? What they've done, they measured the moisture from 1961 to 1990. And then in 2011, they start noticing that they looked at moisture index and temperature in across Alberta, and this is 2012, and you can see how much almost whole Alberta is under the drought. And again, you can see this 2030 is better, but north is still under drought compared to the normal levels. 14 is definitely again, whole Alberta is under the dry spell. 15 was absolutely horrendous. I think that's where the year we have a Fort McMurray fire. And you can see in your area, it's constantly dry. And again, that's where's the difference in the temperature, and the 16 is a little bit better than that. And again, this is the overall average for those 5 years. And I think we're going to get all next 5 years, hopefully very soon. As I said, a friend of mine told me the amount of, he works in with the forest fires, and he said to me, last 7-8 years, it's record-breaking temperature when it comes to the forest fire, and we're noticing that. And again, that's the long-term impact that is going to have on our trees. And drought is the symptoms probably of the climate change that is going on as we speak. What does it look like on the ground? And again, this is a very powerful picture. In 2003, you can see, guys, and probably if you go back in your property, you can see the natural aspen, lots of trees, healthy trees, lots of understory vegetation. 5 years later, you see those are dead sticks. And that's one of the things with the aspen and balsam poplar. When they die very fast. And just from 5 years, you go from here to here. And then 5 more years or 4 more years, you go from here to here. So in 10 years or less, you have a nice and healthy forest to totally different ecosystem. There's a huge amount of deadfall here, and the fire will go through this area. So what that means, this is a picture in Peace River region. All of this aspen is dead. And that wood is a perfect for fire. People have illusion, if I have aspen trees, it's not going to burn. No, Chuck Lake fire proved that actually most of the fire was burning into the dead aspen area. We have fires just west of here a few weeks ago. All of them is aspen, dead aspen that is burning. And in your counties, lots of, most of them in the species is aspen. What it means, of course, it means the fire. And fire can be foe and can be very beneficial to the forest. What we are noticing in some parts of the United States and in Canada, once fire used to be, like I always said, 95% of the forest in Alberta is originated by the fire. Fire comes, new forests come back. But what they notice in the United States, in Idaho, Oregon, Montana, Colorado, Americans noticing the fire comes in, but the forest doesn't come back at all. In some cases, only shrubs come back, totally different shrubs. In some cases, go to the prairie. And that's in your county. What might happen is that forest fire comes in, take the forest out, and you might go back to the prairie. That also might, if you have dead trees, might increase the land conversion to agriculture. What it means to the wildlife, what it means to the biodiversity, what it means to the water storage, what it means to the carbon, that means there's a consequences on that. So if you go from forest ecosystem to prairie ecosystem, totally two different ecosystems, totally two different wildlife, biodiversity, everything is different. Some people can say that's good, some people can say that's not. I don't like it. But again, because of the drought will create the fire and increase the fire and can change the landscape. Plus, like any other fire, can devastate the community and people and loss of the properties and lives. So, go back to the key messages. Try to diversify. Try to understand water requirements. Water regularly and properly. Wood chips. If anything you can do for long term, put the wood chips. Right now, don't fertilize now. Don't prune now. Do that in spring. water in the fall. Do the drip irrigation, heavy watering in the fall. For the municipal folks, if there's any counselor there or emergency service folks, really develop the fire management plans, because the fire will come one way or another. Are you ready for the, is your, Strathcona County had a fire in 2009, and they invited me 2 weeks before the fire. And I asked them, are your firefighters ready to fight a forest fire? Forest fire is gonna come. They couldn't believe me. And 2 weeks later, they burned northeast parts of the Strathcona and Lamont County burned. Their firefighter equipment and clothes were not suitable to fight forest fire. They were suitable to fight fire in the houses and apartments. But the forest fire is a totally different beast. Access to the water, how to fight those a forest fire, how to, in your case, could be a prairie fire, which you guys have a lot of probably experience too. How to do that. So it's totally different, and I would strongly suggest for you guys, emergency service and in your county, to really share some experience with the folks that experience the forest fires in Alberta municipalities. In the long run, if the forests start disappearing, how much that is going to change on the land, on the water, the biodiversity, with the loss of the forested area, what it means to you guys. That's where the much more on the bigger picture, you as a county, that you have to think about it. Quinton, this is me today so far, and this is where you're gonna find. I'm probably gonna post a blog or fact sheets on the drought and trees, and would be available on my website. Any questions or comments, Quinton?
I've been watching our Facebook page and my phone, and nobody's added any comment or questions this time. There's some great topics. I mean, talking about watering is so important right now, and not only watering, but protecting your trees with some type of a mulch, right? Pruning. Everybody has summertime to nip their trees, and yeah, it's super important to get that message out that now is not a good time. Keep whatever's on there, right? And talking about getting your tree set for next spring. Spring is so far away. We have a full winter to go through, but now is the time to really get that tree or your shelter belt ready for next spring, for sure. Great points. Great points. I will share my screen and just remind of the upcoming events we have.
Okay. Okay. Here you go.
That is not what I'm trying to share.
Well, here you go.
Let me try that again. I did this so easy last time. Well, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong this time.
Okay, go back. Or just click the slide or whatever.
There, do you see it now? Talking trees with Toso. You see that? There we go. So just a reminder, guys, August 17 at 1 o'clock, that is our next webinar with Toso. August 24, 31, September 7, 14, 21, and 28. We'll just keep plugging away. Remember, we have these things posted on our YouTube page afterwards. But I would love to have some conversations, have some people come on and have those questions, spark those conversations, and maybe there's something that we're missing that people want to talk about. So get on there and join in. And Toso and I have been talking about maybe a little walkthrough tour when this is all said and done, and we're going to try and work on some details about that and maybe have a face-to-face meet as well. We'll see how this all goes and what questions are out there and go from there.
Yep. That definitely would love to have that we can show that on the face-to-face and on real life yard.
Absolutely.
Nothing replaces that, to be honest. But yeah, I hope that more folks will gonna join us and more questions. And again, that's for me. I always thrive on questions because I always can miss something, and then and until people ask me and say, "Tosha, what about this?" Okay, I never thought about that. So
that's right.
Absolutely, that's the best way for me as well, is to learn if people do have a question. So
yeah, and that's why we're alternating the times between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock. Maybe there's a better time that works for someone, and if we keep them consistently at 10 and 1, we can have people join in with us.
Absolutely. Well, the beauty of this, Quinton, is that people in your county will have this available on YouTube.
That's right.
And anytime if people have some questions or something like that, you can always refer them and say, "Hey, you wanna water trees? Go this YouTube and listen this."
That's
or,
right.
Or do the mulching. This is how you're gonna do it, so they can go quickly and just look at what they need for. So it's a long-term also resources for you, for the residents of your county, that they can have access to it. That's perfect. Okay, Quinton.
Also, I have nothing else. Nothing's popping up. So thank you very much for your time again today. And we'll see you on the 17th of August.
See you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Quinton.
Thank you.